The rain fell in relentless sheets over the small town of Black Hollow, its streets eerily quiet under the oppressive gray sky. Lucas, Ava, Henry, and Liam, a group of close-knit friends, had grown up in the town, hearing whispers of its dark past but never paying them much mind. That was until the night they discovered the old journal hidden in Lucas's attic. The journal was bound in cracked leather and filled with pages of faded, frantic handwriting. It belonged to a woman named Eleanor Holloway, one of the town's earliest settlers. Her final entries were chilling, recounting strange happenings, a child's laughter in the dead of night, shadows moving against the moonlight, and whispers that came from no discernible source. "Do you think this is real?" Ava asked, her voice low as she turned the pages. The flickering candlelight in Lucas's attic cast unsettling shadows on the walls. "Maybe it's just the ramblings of someone who lost their mind," Henry offered, though his shaky voice betrayed his unease. Liam, always the skeptic, scoffed. "This is just old superstition. People back then blamed ghosts for everything they didn't understand." But as they read further, they found a disturbing passage. Eleanor claimed that the land the town was built on was cursed, the spirits of an ancient tribe displaced by the settlers forever tied to the soil. "The ancestors grow restless," she wrote. "And they will not remain silent." That night, strange things began to happen. Ava awoke to the sound of whispering in her room, though no one was there. Henry found handprints on the fogged-up mirror in his bathroom, far too small to belong to any of them. Lucas felt a cold hand brush his shoulder while he was alone in the attic. The group decided they had to investigate the origins of the curse. Armed with flashlights and a growing sense of dread, they ventured into the woods at the edge of town, where Eleanor's journal indicated a sacred burial ground had once stood. The woods were unnaturally silent, their footsteps muffled by the damp earth. As they ventured deeper, they found a clearing marked by ancient stones carved with cryptic symbols. The air grew heavy, and a chilling wind stirred, though the trees stood motionless. Suddenly, Liam froze. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. They all heard it, a low, mournful wail that seemed to come from all around them. Shadows began to coalesce, taking on forms that resembled people, yet were not. Their eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and their expressions were twisted with anguish. "We disturbed something we shouldn't have," Ava said, her voice trembling. The spirits moved closer, their whispers growing louder, overlapping into an incomprehensible cacophony. Lucas, clutching the journal, stepped forward. "We didn't mean to intrude," he shouted. "We just want to understand." The largest of the shadows, its form towering and imposing, paused. In a voice that seemed to echo from the depths of the earth, it spoke. "The blood of the settlers binds you. You must atone." "What does that mean?" Henry asked, panic rising in his voice. The spirit raised an ethereal arm and pointed to the ground. Lucas flipped through the journal, stopping at a page he hadn't seen before. It described a ritual to appease the spirits, a sacrifice of something precious to the descendants of the settlers. "We have to do it," Lucas said, his voice breaking. The group hurriedly gathered what they had on hand, family heirlooms, photographs, and objects of sentimental value they carried with them. Placing them on the ancient stones, they stepped back as the spirits surrounded the offering. The objects disintegrated into ash, and the oppressive air lifted. The spirits began to fade, their anguished expressions softening. As the last shadow disappeared, the towering figure spoke again. "The past must be remembered. Forget, and we will return." The friends left the woods, forever changed by what they had experienced. Black Hollow seemed quieter, less foreboding, but the warning stayed with them. They vowed to honor the town's history, sharing the story of the spirits and the settlers so that the curse would not be forgotten. But deep in the woods, the ancient stones remained, waiting for the day when the ancestors' patience would once again run out. The friends returned to their homes after the ritual, shaken to their cores. For days, Black Hollow was unusually still, the persistent rain giving way to an eerie calm. Yet, the silence weighed heavily on them. The spirit's warning lingered in their minds like a specter, and they couldn't shake the feeling that their ordeal wasn't over. A month later. It began subtly, with small disturbances that could easily be dismissed. Ava's paintings fell from their hooks without cause. Henry's dog barked at empty corners, its hackles raised. Lucas's attic door refused to stay shut, no matter how many times he bolted it. Liam's skepticism persisted, but even he couldn't deny the strange flickering of lights in his house or the phantom footsteps pacing above him at night. One cold evening, Lucas called an emergency meeting at his house. The group huddled in the attic once more, the journal spread before them. "This isn't over," Lucas said, his voice tight. "You think?" Ava snapped, rubbing her arms as though warding off a chill. "Something is still, watching us. I feel it all the time." "We did what they asked," Henry argued. "We gave the offerings. Why won't they leave us alone?" Liam leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Maybe it wasn't enough. Or maybe we just scared ourselves into imagining things." But Lucas shook his head. "It's more than that. I've been rereading the journal, and I think we only scratched the surface of what Eleanor was trying to warn us about. There's another passage, one I didn't notice before." He flipped to a page near the back, the ink faint and faded. The words were barely legible, but the meaning sent a chill through the room. "The ritual wasn't the end," Lucas explained. "It was just the beginning. Eleanor wrote that the spirits won't rest until the wrongs of the settlers are truly atoned for." "What does that even mean?" Ava whispered. Lucas hesitated before reading aloud. "To break the bond of blood, the truth must be unearthed, and the sacrifice made whole." Determined to uncover the truth, the group delved into Black Hollow's history. Days turned into weeks as they pored over old records, interviewed elderly townsfolk, and combed through the library's archives. What they found painted a much darker picture than they'd ever imagined. Black Hollow had been built on the site of a massacre. The settlers, led by Eleanor's husband, had slaughtered the native tribe that once thrived in the area, all to claim the fertile land for themselves. Eleanor's journal suggested she had tried to stop the violence, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. In the end, the tribe cursed the land with their dying breaths, vowing that the settlers and their descendants would never know peace. "It's not just about remembering," Lucas said during another late-night meeting. "The spirits want justice. But how do you give justice to people who've been dead for centuries?" Liam asked, his skepticism beginning to crack under the weight of their discoveries. The answer came in the form of an old map tucked into the journal. It showed the location of the tribe's sacred temple, deep in the woods beyond the burial ground. Eleanor had written that the temple was the source of the curse, and the key to ending it. The following night, under the light of a waning moon, the friends ventured into the woods once more. The air was colder than it should have been, and the trees seemed to press in around them, their twisted branches clawing at the sky. It took hours to find the temple. Hidden beneath centuries of overgrowth, it was a crumbling structure of stone and earth, its entrance marked by a weathered totem carved with grotesque faces. "I don't like this," Henry said, his flashlight shaking in his hand. "We've come this far," Lucas replied. "We can't stop now." The inside of the temple was worse than they could have imagined. The walls were covered in ancient symbols, painted in what looked uncomfortably like blood. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and faint whispers seemed to echo from the shadows. At the center of the room was an altar, blackened with age and surrounded by more of the strange symbols. As they approached, the temperature dropped sharply, and the whispers grew louder, resolving into words. "Blood must answer blood," the voices intoned, overlapping in an otherworldly chorus. "What do we do?" Ava asked, her voice barely audible. Lucas stepped forward, placing the journal on the altar. "We're here to atone," he shouted. "Tell us what we have to do." The room fell silent. Then, with a deafening roar, the shadows in the corners of the temple surged forward, coalescing into the towering figure they had seen in the woods. Its eyes burned like hot coals, and its voice rumbled like an earthquake. The bloodline must be severed. The friends stared in horror. What does that mean? Henry asked, his voice shaking. The spirit raised a hand, and the air filled with visions. They saw the settlers, Lucas's ancestors, carrying out the massacre, their faces twisted with greed and malice. Then they saw themselves, bound by the sins of the past, their own bloodlines cursed. It wants one of us, Ava realized, her face pale. A life for a life. Panic set in. They argued, each of them desperate to find another way. But the spirit was unwavering. To break the curse, it said, one must willingly give their life. No, Henry whispered. There has to be another way. There isn't, Lucas said, his voice grim. This is what Eleanor meant by, the sacrifice made whole. We have to finish what she couldn't. Before anyone could stop him, Lucas stepped onto the altar. Lucas, no. Ava screamed. This has to end, he said, tears streaming down his face. If we don't do this, the curse will never stop. The town will never be free. The spirit loomed over him, its form flickering like a dying flame. Do you give your life willingly? Lucas nodded, his voice steady despite his fear. I do. The spirit extended a hand, and a blinding light engulfed the room. The others shielded their eyes, their screams drowned out by a deafening roar. When the light faded, Lucas was gone. The altar was empty, and the spirit stood silent, its form less menacing, almost serene. The bond is broken, it said. The ancestors are at peace. With that, it dissolved into the air, leaving the friends alone in the silent temple. They returned to Black Hollow, forever changed. The curse had lifted, no more whispers, no more shadows, no more cold hands brushing their shoulders. But the price had been steep. Lucas's name became a legend in the town, his sacrifice ensuring that the sins of the past would never be forgotten. Ava, Henry, and Liam dedicated their lives to preserving the history of Black Hollow, telling the story of the tribe and the settlers so that the town would never repeat its mistakes. Yet deep in the woods, the temple remained, a silent reminder of the horrors they had faced. And though the curse was broken, the friends couldn't shake the feeling that the ancestors were still watching, waiting to see if the living would honor the dead, or betray them once more.